Welcome to lesson 3 of 3 on tritones. In the first lesson I covered the basics of the tritone substitution. In the second lesson I covered the tritones minor. I'll link those up in the description. Today is about taking it a step further into your lead guitar playing. The tritone substitution is most often taught as a sub for the rhythm guitarist, so a way to change the chords up in the 2-5-1. And I think it would be a shame if it didn't become part of your soloing toolkit, part of your soloing arsenal, if you like. Even if the rhythm section, your bandmate, the backing track hasn't got the tritone sub on the 2-5-1, it's something you can still exploit as a lead guitar player, as a soloist. And it's a real nice way to add some tension and dissonance to your playing. But as with any dissonance, any sense of tension that you bring into your playing, you've got to know how to resolve it, and that's what I'm going to show you today. If we've got a 2-5-1 in C, D minor 7, G7, C major 7, or with all typical variations you could get there, we could just play our arpeggios to that like this. And what I could also do, the piano in the background is going to play G7, I'm going to play D flat 7, so the tritone. So I could go something like, and make it obvious. You hear that there? So if I just play, arpeggios up in order, D minor 7, G7, C major 7, tritone instead, here, D flat 7, C major 7. Yeah. Can be played in more inventive ways with different rhythms and adding in, maybe bringing in some scale notes, but just to hear there, that creates some interest. What about if we put the tritones minor on? So, we could have D minor 7, then A flat minor, D flat 7, C. So like, let's see what that sounds like. That gave us more movement. So even though the backing track was D, G, C, I was like D minor, A flat minor, D flat 7, C. It doesn't have to be as busy as that. Do da da, do da da, do da da, do da do. You play simpler lines. But first off, I just get used to the chord tones. Like that. Do. Do do da da da, do do da da do do da da da, that type of thing. Another cool idea is this idea of bitonal arpeggios, where you put two together, and you can do that with the tritone. So you can go like D minor 7, then G7, D flat 7. So like that's D minor 7, then G7, D flat 7, C, which gives, I think, this kind of like tension at the end of that G7 bar. Suddenly ramps up, and then resolve it by landing on a note of the C chord. G7, D flat 7, C. Let's hear that against the chords. That works really well, I think. Same idea, just sort of voicing it a little bit differently. So that's combining G7, D flat 7, C. Quite cool. I like that. G triad to D flat. Lends itself to triplets. That's cool. Now, all of those things are good possibilities, but I think it's fair to say everything I just played was kind of just very like, hey guys, I'm whipping out the tritone. Oh, and then I'm bringing out the tritones minor. It didn't really flow very well. So, and that's fine. To start with, don't put your pressure on yourself to do that. You just want to just hear the ideas, play them simply, play them slowly. And that, that's your start point, and we move on to trying to get things to flow into each other a little bit more. It's as simple as this. I'm looking for three things: notes which stay the same, notes which go up, notes which go down. So I think if we think about using, say, D flat 7 going into a C chord, if I put those notes on the screen, D flat 7 being D flat, F, A flat, B, one of those notes stays the same, B, D flat goes down a semitone to C, F goes down a semitone to E, A flat goes down a semitone to G. And this is all about the point of transition. So at the end of the bar of the tritone, the D flat 7, if I ended on any of those notes, I'd probably go to the nearest note from the next chord, because that's going to sound nice and smooth and efficient. It also really helps illustrate tension to release because you hear it more easily, I think. And, you know, you think about it academically to start with. In the long run, you just hear all this stuff. But first off, it has to be like, okay, so B is a shared note between, you know, D flat 7 and C. So that's a useful thing to know. So what I would do is I'd work on playing D minor into D flat and 7, and I'd also work on playing D flat 7 into C, almost like ditch the 3 chord thing and just work on 2 chords. So let's say D flat 7 to C, because I think that's where the most interest is. So if I finished on, I could stay on that. I could go up a D flat, D flat dominant 7th arpeggio, and then we land on a C chord, and I stay on that B on the top. So it stays the same, that note. If we finished on D flat, so I go down the arpeggio, B, A flat, F, D flat, just it's dying to go to that C, isn't it? What if we finished on the 5th of the D flat, which is an A flat there? So that's semitone above G, which is the 5th of C. So we could go begging to go to that G. If we finished on the F, say we got this phrase. Hear that? There's the F, E. So it's about hearing these things, finding these things. But again, you've got to be able to know your chord tones. And, you know, if you're on a D flat 7, can you play the arpeggio from the root, from the 5th, from the 7th, so forth. And then, you know, it's accessing the information, I think, from different points. You know, and this is where practicing your chord tones, practicing your arpeggios can be a bit overwhelming, but, you know, it's just something, you know, just to chip away at, make it a big part of your practice. Every time you practice, work on your chord tones, because it pays dividends. And finally, I want to show you a couple bonus subs that I like. So one of the things I like to do on a 2 chord, so like D minor 7, is play a major 7 arpeggio built off the 3rd. So F is the 3rd of D minor 7. So if you play an F major 7 over a D minor, creates a lovely D minor 9 sound, which is really sweet. So we can use that. Now, if you remember, over a G7 we could wheel out the tritones minor. So, you know, over a G7 we could go A flat minor 7, D flat 7 into the C. Now, A flat minor 7, let's think about A flat minor 6 instead. A flat minor 6 is the same notes as an F minor 7 flat 5. So what we could do is think F major, F minor, and then C. So that would give us, let me just try that against the track. I think that sounded pretty good. That was going up an F major 7, down an F minor arpeggio, landing on an E, which is the 3rd of C. Now another sub I like it off the, again off the 3rd, this time the 3rd of the C chord, is you can play a minor 7 off the 3rd of a major chord. So the 3rd of C is E, and we could play E minor 7. So you could have F major 7, F minor, E minor. That could sound quite sweet, I think. Like that sound. Just creating different sounds, you know. F, so that's thinking F, F minor to E minor. We've come a long way from D minor, G7, C, but it's just ways to breathe life into this progression. The thing I liked about that is you get the F, F minor, E minor, it's kind of falling. And you can do a similar thing. You can do a minor 7 arpeggio bit off the 5th of a 2 chord or a minor chord. So the 5th of D minor 7 is A minor 7, so we could have, and then we could take the tritones minor, and then we can go to to C. So that's A minor, 7, A flat minor 7, C. Let's hear that against the chords. Quite a tense one, but still one you could use. So there's quite a lot of subs packed into today. All the important thing is that close resolution thing you want to try to go for. And always try to internalize the sound of any substitution you're using. That will help you be able to use it more freely. You don't want to have to be thinking when you're soloing in the long run, oh, let's use a tritone now. I don't think like that. It's something I can hear as a possibility that I can go to again through practicing these things, but thinking mindfully about the sound, not practicing things passively, and always trying to spot. When you're listening to people play, trying to identify these sort of things and start to try to work out what people are doing. Because once you can hear a few of these things, you start to recognize them in jazz recordings and performances. But now, where's the scales today? You might be thinking, well, I think with this kind of thing, the whole point of using these chord substitutions for me is to avoid using complicated scales. You could explore using the mixed Lydian of the tritone. That could create some interesting sounds, definitely. I personally just think of it from a chord tone basis because it's what I prefer. It's a simpler way for me to think. Chord tones really get to the nitty gritty of outlining changes, so that's why there's no scales today. It's not to say I never use scales. They do kind of fit into my approach to jazz. They're just the arpeggios, chord tones take precedent. And that brings me to the end of 3 videos on the tritone. I hope it's been useful. If you'd like me to do series videos like this again in the future, then if you think it's a good format, then definitely leave me some feedback, some comments below, or suggestions for things you'd like me to look at. It's interesting because I come up with ideas of things that I think are important, but there might be things you guys think, oh, it'd be nice to see a video on that topic or that song. And check the description for links to the PDF, all the resources there from today. There's also links to the Jazz Guitar with Andy Facebook group and also my Buy Me a Coffee page. I'll put 2 videos up on the screen from myself about other important jazz topics and things you might want to have a look at. Thanks so much for watching. If you're new here, my name's Andy, Jazz Guitar Lessons every Wednesday and Saturday. Hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. Until next time, you take care.